My name is Zoe. I live in a serene rural area. I have a cherished picture of my mother-in-law Grace set against the backdrop of the fields she nurtured. Whenever I look at it, her face beams back at me with a warm smile. Living this peaceful life is all thanks to Grace being on my side. Even though Grace and I aren't blood related, she's as much a mother to me as anyone could be. A true lifesaver. To tell the truth, it took a whirlwind of experiences to get to where I am now. Back then, I was 37 and working as an office professional. So consumed by my job, I had lost touch with my feminine side, completely ignoring the idea of marriage. One day, my concerned boss suggested I consider an arranged date. That's how I met my husband Samuel, who was also seen as someone who had let work get in the way of a family life. We were both hesitant at first, but soon found comfort in each other's mature demeanor. We clicked, especially because we were close in age and smoothly transitioned into marriage. Samuel only had his mother Grace in a far-off place and no close relatives. I too had lost both parents early on and was alone, so we decided to forgo a wedding ceremony and go on a trip with Grace instead. Grace felt bad for third-wheeling on our honeymoon, but the joy of having a family again outweighed any awkwardness. So I was the one who enthusiastically invited her. After our wonderful trip, when it was time to drop Grace back at her countryside home, we just couldn't bear to leave her alone. So on the way back, Samuel and I seriously discussed moving her in with us. When we talked to Grace about it, she expressed her gratitude but politely declined, saying she had things she still wanted to do in her rural life. Even so, we knew Grace was getting older and couldn't be alone forever. We promised each other to visit her as often as we could. So that's what we did. Our visits to see Grace became a regular part of our lives, whether to celebrate holidays, anniversaries, or birthdays. Several years have passed since our marriage, and we've been living the same fulfilling days. My husband and I had been struggling to find quality time together, but we made an effort to align on our days off. We cherished the moments when we could cook elaborate meals using the fresh vegetables Grace often sent us and enjoy a glass of wine. Then, in December, with Christmas just around the corner, something happened. I was on a work errand with my boss when a distracted driver hit me at a crosswalk. Though the car wasn't going fast, the impact sent me sprawling onto the road. My boss rushed over, asking, "Are you okay?" I tried to get up, saying, "I'm fine," but I was overwhelmed with intense pain and couldn't move. Oh, I couldn't even speak, just groan. Sensing the seriousness, my boss called an ambulance. I thought it was a bit much until the hospital told me I had fractured my femur and had to be admitted immediately. My husband, who couldn't leave work right away, texted me on WhatsApp, "I heard you're in the hospital. Are you okay? I'll come as soon as I finish work." Finally, he visited me as the lights were dimming for the night. "I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner," he apologized. Feeling guilty for causing him trouble, I also apologized. Just when Christmas break was days away, this had to happen. Worse, I wasn't allowed to go home, and I felt so sad not being able to keep our plans to visit Grace. I knew Grace would have been preparing our favorite dishes in anticipation. When I shared this with my husband, he offered to go visit her alone, but was hesitant because there's no cell signal at Grace's house, making it difficult to contact me. I told him not to worry. The hospital is taking good care of me. Please don't disappoint Grace. If you go, I'll be able to rest easy. Even though I couldn't move, I was a bit restless and messaged him frequently to make sure he didn't forget anything. At first, he replied quickly, but then the intervals between his responses grew longer. Eventually, even the read receipts were delayed. He must be on the move. I bet a lot of people are traveling home, so it must be hectic. I thought to myself, trying to ease my worry. He was scheduled to leave home before noon, so if everything went well, he should arrive at Grace's house by the evening. I spent my time looking at the clock, calculating, and wondering how Grace, unaware of my broken bones, would react when she found out I couldn't come. The lights out time passed, and I hadn't heard from either my husband or Grace. Had his arrival been severely delayed? I tried sending my husband another message on WhatsApp, but it didn't even show a read receipt. However, if he's at Grace's house, the cell service might be bad there. He may not even realize he's received a message. I reassured myself, thinking he must have arrived. At that moment, I thought we'd hear from him once he got to the city the next day. But days passed without a word from him or Grace. I considered reaching out to Grace, but since I was in a shared hospital room and couldn't leave my bed, there was no way for me to make a call, so I had to give up. The new year had come and gone, but still no word from anyone. I spent the Christmas season alone, feeling quite lonely. The daily essentials my husband had brought me had long run out, and dirty laundry was piling up. Suddenly, I felt completely wretched and broke down from crying again. After crying for a while, I decided to send one more message. I wanted to clear away the nagging doubts I had about Grace, so I sent an email to the address she had given me. I apologized for not being able to spend the promised Christmas season together and briefly updated them on my injury, which my husband would probably have told her about. But I thought, when would Grace, who's not digitally savvy due to her age, see this email? Despite my apprehensions, I pressed the send button. In less than 5 minutes, I got a call from Grace's home. Since I was in the hospital room, I couldn't pick up. And while pondering what to do, the call disconnected. Shortly after, an email popped up. I could check the emails from my bed. It was from Grace and said only, "What's going on?" Then another email came, inexplicably, asking for the name of the hospital where I was admitted. Confused, I sent it. After that, communications from Grace stopped altogether. No matter how many times I emailed, no reply came back. I checked my husband's WhatsApp. My messages since before Christmas were unread. Suddenly, I had a horrible thought. Could something have happened to him? So preoccupied with my own condition, I'd failed to consider even this possibility. How pathetic I felt. Maybe Grace was at the hospital, accompanying my husband. I used the nurse call button to inquire if there had been any messages or queries for me. There were none. As I lay staring at the ceiling in despair, I heard a commotion in the corridor. From where I was, I could only see the top of this person's head, but they seemed to be looking for someone, scanning the room. As the figure came closer to my bed, their face came into view. Our eyes met, and I couldn't help but shout, "Grace, what are you doing here?" Grace had already been crying and burst into tears the moment she saw me. "Why didn't you tell me you were so seriously injured? This is not like you," She kept crying. Seeing Grace again brought tears to my eyes as well. We both cried for a while, but when I regained my composure, I started wondering about my husband. He was supposed to have gone to visit Grace, so why didn't he tell her anything? Had he explained, Grace wouldn't be this distressed. I asked her about my husband's whereabouts. Grace looked puzzled and replied, "Isn't he here with you?" She said he'd contacted her before Christmas, telling her I wanted to go on a trip just the two of us, and that he wouldn't be coming home this year. He'd also asked her not to reach out, because I'd get jealous. Grace thought it wasn't her place to interfere in our marriage, so she refrained from contacting us. But she'd gotten worried when she sent him an email on Christmas Day and received no reply. When I told her I'd also lost contact with my husband, Grace went silent for a moment. Noticing the laundry piling up, she offered to go to my house and pick up what I needed. She quickly packed a bag and hailed a taxi, saying, "I'll be right back," before exiting the hospital room. Her visit gave me comfort, but my husband's absence remained a mystery. I tried messaging him again, but the outcome was the same. No response. My worries returned. I gave messaging one last shot, but ended up with the same result. The anxiety started creeping in again. Grace had promised to be right back, but she left and stopped communicating. Is she okay? Did she get lost? What's going on? The next morning, Grace appeared in my hospital room. "Grace, I was really worried," I said. "I'm sorry, I got caught up with some things," she said, bowing her head apologetically. She helped me into fresh pajamas and then filled me in on last night. Turns out Grace was suspicious of my husband's behavior. As soon as she got to my house, she used the computer and phone to try and find out where he was. She was spitting out tech terms left and right. SNS follows, GPS tracking, cloud-based scheduling. Who knew she was so tech-savvy? When I asked how she knew all this, she said she taught herself. Apparently, she even sells vegetables online that she grows herself. She had been using a computer for work for about a year now, but had kept it a secret to surprise us. To promote her products, she uses social media, where she found my husband's account and from there located a certain individual. A woman currently in Anchorage, and her post suggests she's traveling with a man. Grace found a picture with part of my husband's face in it and suspected he was having an affair. She returned to confirm this with me. I nervously checked the woman's account. The photos left me stunned. The woman was Emma, a coworker. I'd never heard that she and my husband were even social media friends. I'd never seen them talking. Was all this a ruse? My heart sank, replaced by a rising tide of anger. Grace apologized to me, saying, "Even if he's my son, what he's doing is unforgivable." The shock left me speechless, but then I remembered some of my husband's recent strange behavior. Lately, he'd been coming home late, blaming it on work. A few days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Coming home felt different. Whether it was mental or not, I couldn't say. But as Grace and I sat sipping coffee, the front door burst open. We heard laughter, male and female, and footsteps headed our way. My nerves tightened, but I regained composure looking at Grace's stern face. In walked my husband and his affair partner. The tension was palpable, broken only by my husband, who stammered.
"You've got it all wrong. She was just concerned about Zoe. We ran into each other near the apartment.
His affair partner looked shocked and opened her eyes wide. You're no longer a child of mine. From now on, we're strangers. Aside from the affair, it was the most shocking thing I'd heard. But knowing Grace's disdain for lies, her decision was unwavering. Finally realizing the peril he was in, my husband started to panic. But nobody was listening to him anymore. I put the divorce papers in front of him. Coerced by Grace, he reluctantly signed. Seeing me put the signed papers into my bag, he finally understood divorce was inevitable and moved closer to his mistress. She must have lost faith in him after witnessing his pathetic behavior. She slapped him and abruptly left the room. Grace and I also left the room, our purpose served. Months later, worn out emotionally and physically from the divorce saga, I resigned from my job and took some time off. I left my city apartment, lugging big suitcases, sweating as I climbed an unpaved, steep hill. From the person standing toward the sun, I smelled the same scent as the sun itself. Grace, I'm home. With that, she wordlessly welcomed me into her home. For more than a decade since, Grace and I have supported each other. However, the signs of aging spared Grace no exceptions. Even bedridden, Grace maintained her poise, impressing even me who was nursing her. I assumed Grace led a lonely life, but she had many friends around her. That was likely due to her caring, upbeat nature. Although Grace passed away a few months ago, her teachings are etched in my heart. I may not have been able to spend my life with my husband, but the only person I could ever call Mom is Grace. Now I carry on Grace's wishes, working on her farm. The kindness of the neighbors who are teaching me probably has something to do with Grace's influence. For those who've never lived in the countryside, this life might seem inconvenient. But having stepped away from worldly pursuits, I feel happier than ever.